It's 18 minutes to 10 o'clock, and after 10, the old broadcaster takes over in that doddering but warm-hearted way of his.
Terry Wogan, for almost 8 years the Radio 2 Housewife's Choice, but who, unlike many of his fellow immigrants who have become more English than the English, has used his whimsical Irishness to take him to the top of his professional tree and a sense of Ireland into the homes of millions of British listeners.
Something I said, you know. I think in a lot of cases what happens is Irish people come over here without any job, without the prospect of a job, and immediately huddle together for warmth with other Irish people, and never really. I've met Irish people who've been here for 30 years who've never assimilated into society here at all. But as far as the other thing goes, yes, you get what used to be called the Castle Catholic who'll come over and as it were, eschew his Irish identity altogether. I don't think there's any necessity to do either.
For over a century, poverty, unemployment and social deprivation have driven waves of immigrants across the Irish Sea to the London of Percy French, where the streets were paved with gold. Some, of course, found their crock, but for others, life in the mean streets of Camden Town and Kilburn, where they settled, was little better than that they'd left behind in rural Ireland. Nurtured by their memories and their family ties, the Irish in London lived on a dream. The dream of making their fortune and returning to their native villages in big cars and smart suits, their pockets stuffed with pound notes. For 25 years now, the pursuit of that dream for many has begun here at the Irish Centre in Camden Square, built by the Irish community to help new arrivals find their feet.
Irish Centre? Yes, you did ring about Tom Hannon, is that right? Yeah, well, he did come over here this morning.
Father Sheridan, why do people come to the Irish Centre with problems rather than going to the statutory social services?
Because we're Irish. And as Irish, we'd understand, they know and feel that we would understand the problem quicker than anybody else.
But I think on the whole, Irish people who come here think of it just as a temporary measure until they make a bit of money and go back home. Of course, they change their minds later on, depending on the kind of employment they get and if they meet somebody and have plans to get married. Then, of course, their outlook changes. But I think for the young emigrant arriving, I think the plans would be to go home when things are better.
There are over 750,000 Irish in London, from north and south of the border. Many lose themselves in the anonymity of the city, from the relative affluence of the stockbroker commuter belt to the dole queues, soup kitchens and drunkenness of the down-and-outs. The tide of immigration, though, has turned in the last 10 years as conditions and job prospects improve at home, and Ireland is still home. Even after 30 years working and living in London, many an Irishman will still talk about going home for a holiday twice a year. But while he is here, he's created a little Ireland to preserve an often fanciful dream of his native land. He scans the Irish papers for news of home, friends and family. He drinks in Irish pubs, what London pub isn't managed by an Irishman. And like most foreigners in a foreign land, he seeks solace in the songs and stories of home.
My contribution to Ireland, other people get titles in this country, I think, but my contribution to Irish music is when I play on the fiddle, and I think I'm doing that for my own country by promoting that. That's what I'd say, anyhow.
The music, because it brings everybody together. It's mostly the Irish people, because they're all over here, and they're away from home. And it brings them together, and it's a great togetherness for them, and they enjoy it, and therefore they all meet in the favourite. And it's a great meeting place for the music in the favourite.
But, more often than not, the dream is better than the reality. For 6 years, Maeve Binchy has worked in London for the Dublin-based Irish Times.
I think the Irish in England have always been slightly schizophrenic because if you, I mean, apart from the fact that England was the ancient enemy, and it might have been a bit galling for many people to have to come and earn a living from the nation who in song and story were always the bad guys, apart from that altogether, it was so very near. And in fact, it was possible. And the Irish Tourist Board now would tell you, I don't know whether they would tell you or not, but I think they would, kind of statistics about people who used to, when they came over here first, go home every year for holidays. And then after that, they found themselves being a bit disappointed because the dream that they used to build up every year for the 2 weeks in September or the 2 weeks in June wasn't as good as reality. And I think there is a danger in every country that you glamorise your home.
But whatever generation, when an Irishman in London feels his national identity most acutely is after a terrorist incident, a bombing in Guildford, Birmingham or the Old Bailey.
I myself, certainly when there has been an attack or a series of attacks, I feel that there is a tension arises between me and my English friends. Part of that's my fault, because I very often am hesitant when something has happened, and when I go to meet some of them, one just wonders how one is going to be taken. But the fault probably is mine almost as much as theirs.
So it can be very difficult if you have bombs in a Birmingham pub and then you have to come up with a cheery, unmistakably Irish voice at the end of the bulletin and introduce a record. But if you started to dwell on that, you'd never do anything. You'd become completely introverted and lack any spontaneity. And I feel, anyway, that the public tend to feel sympathy for me when that kind of thing happens.
Memories are thankfully short, but images linger. The Irish joke, the conversation invariably turning to the Troubles in Ulster, the slogan on the wall, all testify to a distrust of foreigners of whatever nationality, and a forgetfulness of the positive contribution they've made.
Laugh at me and me Irish jokes. Don't hit me. I'm not actually saying that. What I'm saying is I'm proud to be Irish. That's what I am. And I'd like you to accept me as that. If you don't, then I shall pack my bags and go home again.